My name is Eleanor Chase. I'm 62 years old, and this is the story of how I lost everything and found something better. I spent 40 years building a simple dream, a quiet home, a comfortable retirement, mornings filled with coffee, books, and the gentle kind of peace that only comes after a life of work. I wasn't rich, but I was steady. Every paycheck a little tucked away, every bonus a little extra toward the future. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't glamorous, but it was mine until it wasn't. Her name was Danielle, my only daughter. Smart, beautiful, ambitious. She could light up a room just by walking into it and shatter it just as quickly when things didn't go her way. I loved her. God, I loved her. But loving someone doesn't mean you should trust them with everything. And I learned that lesson too late. It started small, alone here, alone there. Just until next month, Mom. Just until the new job kicks in, Mom. Each time I said yes. Each time I believed her. Because that's what mothers do, isn't it? They believe, even when they shouldn't. One rainy Tuesday, she sat across from me in my kitchen, eyes red from crying. Mom, they're going to take the apartment. I just need a little help. Just sign this so I can access a bit of the trust. She slid the papers toward me, thick, official, full of words I didn't fully understand, but I trusted her, trusted that she would never hurt me. I signed. Without reading, without asking questions, without imagining a world where she would use those papers to drain every cent I had. 3 weeks later, my bank account was empty. Gone. All of it. The retirement savings, the emergency fund, even the checking account I used for groceries. When I called the bank in a panic, the woman on the other end of the line said, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Chase. The funds were legally transferred with the authorization Y." I remember just sitting there, phone sliding from my hand, heartbeat loud in my ears, the smell of burnt coffee on the stove, and the dawning realization that my daughter, my own daughter, had stolen my future. I didn't cry, not then. I packed a bag, walked 5 miles in the rain to clear my head, sat in the library until closing, and when I finally came home to that dark, cold, empty kitchen, I made a decision. I was done waiting for someone else to fix it. If Danielle had taken my old life away, then I would build a new one without her, without apology, without regret. Because you don't need savings to start over. You just need fury steady enough to be mistaken for strength. And I had plenty of that. Starting over sounds noble when you say it fast, like a fresh page, like a sunrise. But starting over at 62, it feels a lot more like standing barefoot in a snowstorm, watching the life you built burn to the ground. I had $212 to my name, no home I could afford to keep, no savings, no family willing to admit what had been done. Danielle was gone. No apology, no explanation, just silence. I sold my car, canceled every subscription, packed up the house, my house, and rented a single room in a boarding house 2 towns over. Shared bathroom, shared kitchen, no privacy, no safety net. Just a lock on a flimsy door and a window that wouldn't quite shut. At night, I lay awake, listening to the sounds of other people's lives through the thin walls. A baby crying, a man coughing, a woman laughing into her phone, and me, just breathing, just surviving. The first job I found was at a diner, filling coffee cups, wiping down booths, smiling at people who looked right through me. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't dignified, but it was mine. And after a lifetime of believing dignity came from comfort, I learned that real dignity comes from doing what needs to be done without asking the world to applaud you. I worked doubles, took the worst shifts, saved every dollar. Not for Danielle, not for anyone else. For me. For the woman who was slowly, stubbornly, planting new seeds in the frozen ground of her life. Sometimes customers asked, "You used to work somewhere fancy, didn't you?" I just smiled, because I had learned you don't owe everyone your story. Some things are yours to keep. At night, I wrote. Small things at first, lists of what I still had, lists of what I refused to lose next, dreams I was afraid to say out loud. One page said, "I will own something again. I will sleep without fear. I will never sign anything I haven't read and understood first." The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months, and slowly, so slowly, I almost didn't notice. The woman who had been broken into pieces started to come back together. Not the same, stronger, sharper, and infinitely harder to fool. Because the thing about being robbed by someone you love is, it either makes you bitter or it makes you unstoppable. And I had made my choice. The first real turning point came by accident. It was a Sunday, raining, slow at the diner. I was clearing off a corner booth when I overheard two men talking at the counter. Old bookstore on Elm, going out of business. Shame. Place has been there forever. Owner's sick. Family wants a quick sale. Something in me stirred. A bookstore. An ending. Or maybe a beginning. After my shift, still in my coffee-stained uniform, I walked to Elm Street. The bookstore was a squat little building tucked between a dry cleaner and a boarded-up cafe. The windows were dusty, the door stuck when I pulled it open, and the smell inside was damp paper and memories. Shelves sagging under the weight of forgotten stories. A bell above the door that jingled half-heartedly. It was perfect. Broken, abandoned, but still standing, just like me. The owner was an elderly man named Walter. We talked, briefly. He didn't want a bidding war, didn't want a corporation tearing it down. "Someone who loves books should have it," he said, voice raspy. I didn't have the full amount he was asking, not even close, but I offered everything I had saved over 6 months at the diner, plus a promise to keep the store alive. He smiled and agreed. I signed the papers 2 weeks later. This time, I read every word, every clause, every fine print. No more blind trust, no more signatures of hope, only signatures of certainty. It wasn't just a bookstore, it was a seed, a chance to build something again. Not for Danielle, not for anyone else's approval, for me, for the woman who had been left with nothing and chose to plant a forest instead of mourning a single tree. The first few months were brutal. The roof leaked, the heater barely worked. Some books were so moldy I had to throw them. But every morning, when I unlocked that door, I felt a piece of myself knit back together. I painted the walls a soft blue, hung fairy lights over the reading nooks, started a pay-what-you-can shelf for kids who couldn't afford books. The town noticed. People came in, at first out of pity, then out of curiosity, then out of genuine love. One rainy Friday, a woman my age came in, bought a novel, and said, "Thank you for keeping this place alive. I thought we'd lost it." I smiled. "We lose a lot of things," I said. "Doesn't mean we can't make something better." That night, as the rain tapped gently against the bookstore windows, I realized Danielle took my savings, but she didn't take my spirit. She didn't take my fire. And maybe, just maybe, this was the life I was meant to build all along. Spring arrived slowly that year. Soft rains, the smell of fresh earth, a thin, stubborn sunlight that melted the last of the winter ice. Business at the bookstore picked up. Local teachers brought students for field trips. Retired folks came in for poetry nights. Teenagers lounged in the beanbags, pretending not to care, but staying for hours. I wasn't Mitch, not by a long shot. But every night, I went to sleep, tired and proud. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name, written in handwriting I hadn't seen in almost a year. Danielle. I stood staring at it for a long moment, felt my stomach twist, not in anger, not even in sorrow, just exhaustion. I opened it. Inside 2 pages. The first, an apology, the kind that tried to sound sincere but tasted like paper. I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. I was desperate. You have to understand. The second, a request. I need help again. Things haven't worked out. I'm scared. Please, just a little help until I'm back on my feet. You're the only one I can turn to. I sat down at the counter, letter in hand, heartbeat calm. Years ago, that letter would have broken me, pulled me back into the orbit of guilt and obligation. But now I saw it for what it was. Not a bridge, not a healing, just another open hand waiting to take. That night, I wrote back 3 sentences. I wish you peace, Danielle. I hope you find the strength to rebuild. But I will not be part of your undoing anymore. I sealed it, dropped it in the mailbox, and let it go. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, out of survival. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do for someone you love is to refuse to let them keep sinking into the life they've chosen. And next morning, I opened the bookstore early. The sun poured through the windows. A little boy dropped his ice cream on the floor and cried. A woman found an old cookbook she thought was lost forever and laughed. Life continued, not because I clung to it, but because I finally let it carry me forward. Some people think survival looks like armor, sharp, hard, untouchable. But I think survival looks like a bookstore. Small, weathered, filled with broken spines and dog-eared pages and second chances. I didn't just get my life back. I built a better one. 1 page, 1 customer, 1 stubborn day at a time. The bookstore wasn't just surviving, it was growing. Slowly, stubbornly, like a weed between sidewalk cracks. The kind of growth you don't notice at first, until one day you look up and realize it's everywhere. Local papers wrote small articles. Chase's Books, a new chapter for an old town. People started recognizing me at the diner, the post office, the market. Not as the woman who got left behind, not as Danielle's mom, not as poor Eleanor, but as Eleanor Chase, owner, builder, survivor. Some nights, I'd close the store late, lock the door, and just stand there in the dark, breathing it in. The smell of paper and old wood, the echo of lives and stories stitched into the walls. I wasn't rich, but I was rooted. And for the first time since Danielle walked out of my life, I wasn't floating in grief anymore. I was standing on solid ground. Then one Saturday, I noticed a girl sitting outside the shop. 16, maybe 17. Stringy hair, backpack clutched to her chest, watching people come and go. I brought her a sandwich from the cafe across the street. She hesitated, then took it. No thanks, no story, just hunger meeting kindness without a receipt. She came back the next day, and the next, always sitting outside, always watching. Finally, I opened the door and said, You don't have to stay out there, you know? She looked up, cautious, hollow-eyed. Ain't got money. Books don't charge you for looking, I said. Come in. She did. Name was Casey. Ran away from something she wouldn't talk about. I didn't push. I just gave her space. A stool at the counter, coffee when she wanted it, an old paperback mystery novel she read 3 times in a week. No sermons, no saving, just a place to land. Because I knew something most people forgot. Sometimes survival isn't about rescuing. It's about giving someone the dignity to rescue themselves. Little by little, Casey started helping, sorting shelves, sweeping the floors, making coffee. No paycheck, no promises, just a rhythm. 2 broken lives finding a beat. The town noticed. Old Mrs. Green from the Historical Society dropped off donations. The school librarian asked me to speak to the kids about why books still matter. The mayor's assistant sent a handwritten note. Thank you for bringing heart back to Elm Street. And I realized something. Danielle didn't just steal my retirement. She freed me from a life so small, I didn't even know I had outgrown it. She ended one chapter. I was writing another, in ink so bold it could never be erased. One afternoon, Casey didn't show up. Morning passed, then noon, then closing time. The stool by the counter stayed empty. The broom leaned untouched against the wall. I told myself not to worry, not to mother, not to expect. But worry has a way of seeping into the cracks you thought you sealed shut. That night, I left the porch light on, just in case. The next morning, she was there, standing in the doorway, soaked to the bone, backpack clutched tight, eyes wide, ashamed, without a word. She pulled a paperback out of the bag, one of the store's mystery novels, dog-eared, bent, stolen. She thrust it toward me. Didn't mean to, she mumbled. Just panicked. Didn't think you'd want me back. I looked at her, really looked, at the tremble in her hands, the way she couldn't quite meet my eyes, the way shame folded her small. And I saw myself, not the woman Danielle robbed, but the girl I used to be, the one who thought mistakes made you unworthy of forgiveness. I took the book gently, set it on the counter. Then I said, one book doesn't buy or break trust, Casey. Showing up does. She blinked, confused, hopeful, like no one had ever said that to her before. I made 2 cups of coffee, handed her one. We didn't talk about the book, or where she had gone, or why her shoes had holes. We just sat. 2 people who had lost more than they could say, finding shelter in the pages of second chances. Later, after she fell asleep curled in a chair with a blanket over her shoulders, I sat alone behind the counter, thinking about Danielle, about the day she handed me those papers to sign, about how trust isn't a blank check. It's a door you keep opening or closing, one choice at a time. I couldn't change the past, couldn't undo what was stolen. But I could choose what kind of woman I would be next. And I chose this. Not a victim, not a martyr, not a fortress. Just a woman who knew the difference between being used and being needed. And sometimes, the line between the two is a single unlocked door on a rainy morning. 2 months after Casey came into my life, an offer came into my inbox. Big, unexpected, tempting. A real estate developer. Slick logo, corporate tone. They wanted to buy the building, the bookstore, everything. Said they were revitalizing downtown. Said they'd preserve the history while modernizing the experience. Translation: tear down the soul and build condos no one in town could afford. The number they offered was big, bigger than anything I had ever seen attached to my name, enough to retire again, to move somewhere warm, to rebuild the life Danielle had stolen, without lifting another coffee cup or sorting another shipment of dusty paperbacks. I sat with the letter for hours, ran the numbers, imagined a little house by the sea, fresh sheets, quiet mornings, a life without broken spines and broken people trailing through my doors. Freedom, security, everything I thought I wanted when I was standing in that empty kitchen months ago. And yet, I looked around the bookstore, at the battered shelves, at the chair where Casey slept some nights when the shelter was full, at the handwritten community board where people posted about lost cats and book clubs and garage sales, at the scarred floor that echoed every step of every person who walked in here needing something they couldn't quite name. I thought about Casey, about myself, about how sometimes the life you save isn't just your own. The next morning, I wrote back, one sentence, "Thank you for your offer. The bookstore is not for sale." When Casey came in later, smelling like rain and cheap laundry soap, she asked, "Everything okay?" I smiled. Better than okay. Because money could buy peace, but it couldn't buy belonging. And I had spent too long mistaking one for the other. That night, I stayed late at the bookstore, locked the door, turned off the lights, sat alone in the quiet, not mourning what could have been, celebrating what was. Sometimes the biggest revenge against a world that tried to empty you is simply choosing to stay full. Summer came. The roses bloomed wildly outside the bookstore, pink, red, and white, twisting through the fence like they didn't know what it meant to be told no. The town changed too. The new shopping mall stayed half empty. People preferred real places, messy places, places like ours. Saturday mornings at Chase's Books became a ritual. Coffee brewing, laughter spilling into the street, children dragging their parents in to see what treasures they could find for $1. Casey got her GED, got a part-time job at the town library, saved enough to rent a room of her own. She still came by the bookstore, still curled up sometimes in the same old chair, head bent over a novel, feet tucked under her. But she didn't live in the doorway anymore. She had keys now. Keys she earned. One evening after a long day, she sat across from me at the counter. We drank coffee, listened to the cicadas hum. Out of nowhere, she asked, "If you could go back, before everything, before Danielle, before all of this, would you?" I thought about it, really thought. About the kitchen, where I signed away my future with a pen. About the nights I cried into a secondhand pillow. About the mornings my hands ached from carrying trays of coffee I couldn't afford to drink. About the bookstore. About the battered door that let in more broken people than the town knew it had. About the girl sitting in front of me, fierce, whole, stubborn, and I said, "No." She looked surprised. I smiled. Losing everything didn't destroy me, Casey. It cleared the ground, gave me room to plant something real. She nodded slowly, like she understood it not just with her mind, but with her bones. Outside, the sky turned violet. The roses bowed under their own weight. And I realized, Danielle took my money. She took my old dreams. She even took the life I thought I wanted. But she didn't win, because what she left behind became the foundation for a life that was rougher, realer, and infinitely more beautiful. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it isn't cruel. Sometimes it's simply standing tall in a life no one thought you could build. This was mine, brick by brick, page by page, breath by stubborn, defiant breath, and no one could ever take it from me again.